What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Behind the Door podcast with the always gorgeous and smiling Jeremy Hiltz, my good friend. Thank you for tuning in always. Thank you for supporting us. We're going to talk about a really personal topic to me today that I think has bigger implications, but to kind of frame it up, I recently had my probation terminated after almost 16 years in the system, and I had to battle. I had to really battle to have my probation terminated. And I think the more that we've talked about it, the more that we've thought about it, it's something that I think people could really benefit from hearing the story and asking some bigger questions about, like, what is the purpose of our system, and what is the meaning of incarceration and the meaning of probation. And I think a question that we don't ever really ask is, like, what is the purpose that these things are supposed to serve? And, you know, in the last 4 months, I've learned a pretty harsh lesson that even though I've been in the system since I was 21, I don't actually know what the purpose of it is either. And I tried to, you know, really capitalize on the ability to, like, change who I was and grow as a man and be somebody that, like, I'm proud of and somebody that tries to make a difference in my community. But I realized in the last few months that, like, the system doesn't actually care about that. And I think, like, with all your experience in the system, Jeremy, and doing work with people coming through, you know, just even before we start unpacking kind of what I went through in the last few months, I'm just interested from your perspective as somebody who does reentry housing and, you know, does a ton of work in reentry specifically. It's like a pretty big question, kind of a tough question, but what do you think the purpose of our system is of incarceration and probation and supervision and all these things?
Well, I think, it's a punishing system, right? So it's about the punishment, and then it's about, I think, trying to somehow make society feel safe, that because I punish somebody, we punish this person, that they have adequate supervision that goes over it. But, it's a burden sometimes on folks. I think but I also think that there's a place for it too for some folks. Like they kind of need some more support coming out. And I think when it's framed in support, it's a little different. But, like, the system as a whole has been, it's certainly punitive, right? Mm-hmm. So on the back end of it, I think it's really, in a lot of ways, to make society in general feel safe.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about because punishment is definitely a part of the system, and I don't think that there's anybody that works in the system, a judge, a police officer, a prosecutor, who doesn't deny that the purpose of a prison sentence is not just public safety, that it's also, you know, to punish somebody for doing wrong, for breaking the social contract.
It's an atonement, right?
Yeah.
I got to atone for what I've done, right? And be held accountable by society. But the problem is that our legal system and our laws and the punishment is based on things that happened a long time ago, right?
And that's my question when I talk to people, and, you know, it became really personal to me recently because of why I was trying to terminate my probation. But, like, when I ask people, but what is the purpose of the punishment? Like, what is the punishment supposed to inform for somebody, right? And if we believe in the idea of, like, public safety, and that we send people to prison and we supervise them in the community when they're exiting prison to make sure that the public is safe and make sure they have, you know, rules to follow and people to make sure they're following the rules. What do we do when somebody proves that they are not a threat to public, that they are not a threat to their community, that they've actually, the punishment has somehow aided in their learning of changing who they were when they committed the crime or the crimes? And at what point do we say that we need to release people from a system of punishment because the punishment, you know, quote unquote, served its purpose, right? I think that's what I was struggling with when I was going through the process of terminating my probation, because, you know, I look at it, and I'm not somebody, I don't ever want anybody to think that, like, I'm bragging about what I've done, or that I'm like, I think that I've done these great things. I really don't think that the things that I've done have been all that great. I think they've been necessary, and I feel really passionate about what I do. But one thing that I know for sure that nobody can dispute is that I'm not a threat to anybody, right? I'm not a threat in my community. I'm not a threat in public safety. And, you know, for people who are listening and maybe you don't have the context of, you know, mine and Jeremy's story. My story in the elevator pitch version is that when I was 21, I hurt somebody very bad, and I got a 27, all but 17-year prison sentence. And I did 13 years in prison almost, and then I did, you know, 2 years and 4 months on community supervision to end my actual prison sentence, at which point I started a 4-year probation period. And so the split sentence that I had, 27 all but 17, means that I had 4 years of probation, and if I messed up on probation, that the courts could then give me 10 more years in prison aside from any crime I committed or anything. And so, you know, I went through my time in prison really trying to make the most out of it. I focused on education. I focused on taking programs. You know, I really changed from like a reckless, lost 21-year-old kid and became, you know, somebody that I hope that my family and my community is proud of, and somebody that nobody in the system would ever say is like a danger or a threat, right? And it's proven by the fact that while I was on community supervision, before I even started probation, I was allowed to travel. I was allowed to go all over the country to do the work that I do. I was allowed to travel all over the state of Maine, you know, put like 200,000 miles on my car in 2 years to go and do the work that I do. And if I was a threat to anybody, I wouldn't have been allowed to do those things.
You were inside a youth detention.
I was inside of the Maine's only youth prison for, you know, a year and a half while I was still technically incarcerated in the community, working with the most vulnerable people in our society, right? Young people who are incarcerated. And I got to the point that when I was volunteering at the youth prison, like I had a badge that was a volunteer badge that I could literally open doors in the facility, and I could escort young people with no staff member present, and I could have one-on-one conversations with them in locked rooms and do all these things. That these decisions were made because everybody knows that I'm safe and that I care and that I'm not somebody who poses any type of threat. And I've been allowed in other adult prisons. I've been allowed in the prison that I got released from, that technically I'm still incarcerated in while I'm on community supervision, to be at events and do some mentorship and other things. And I went to terminate my probation once it started and was essentially told that this is a terrible idea by the state's attorney, that we should not terminate his probation. He's not done with his punishment yet. 4 months into 4 years of probation is not enough. We have to make sure that we keep our community safe. And then she argued and said that I don't know why he wants his probation terminated. Probation lets him do whatever he wants anyway. And so I'm sitting in the courtroom, you know, being like berated and belittled by the prosecutor who prosecuted my case, telling me that I shouldn't want to be off probation because probation lets me do whatever I want. And my response to it is, well, why does probation let me do whatever I want? It's because I'm safe. It's because I'm not a threat. It's because I've improved myself and I've done things that you say the system is designed to do, which is make people better, but you don't want to let me go. And so if probation says I'm safe and says I'm safe enough to travel the country and travel the state, and if the Department of Corrections that I was incarcerated in for more than 12 years thinks I'm safe enough to be back in the facility and working with kids, what purpose is probation serving at that point? And even though this is my personal story, it's really everybody's story. And it's one of those things like, how do we expect people to want to change when those same people know that no matter how much they change, it's never going to be enough for the system? Sure. Right? And so that's something that I was really having a hard time dealing with.
Well, to be honest, you were telling me about it, and like, yeah, as my friend, I'm like, I want to support your effort. And get the probation terminated, right? But in the back of my mind, I'm like, there's no fucking way. Yeah. Probation terminated. There's no way he's going to go to court. You got this prosecutor like really, really beating the drum. And just, to be honest, it's in, I want to say, but the system worked in the end, yeah. In your end, but because you exercised your rights, and it was pretty clear at the end of the day that what you were saying was true. But it's still like you did do all these things, right? All these things were true, and even with all that, in my experience, I was like, are they actually going to do that? Yeah. And how is like, because on paper, you committed this violent crime and big scary guy, and the picture when you went into and when you went in was you with those dreadlocks and all that stuff, man. You know what I mean? Like, and so somebody had to say, okay, you know, the judge really said had to set all that stuff aside.
Yeah.
Right? You go, this is actually what happened, and that's almost like a risk in that.
For sure.
Like how that looks, you know,
for
what I'm
the
saying?
judge to actually grant it.
To grant it, right? Like, and I think that is something that is shameful almost. That you are going to be judged by what happened in a lot of people's minds from when you was 20 years old. You know what I mean? Not the man you are today. Like, so that is like, it really talks about that. It's hard to even like outgrow what you've done in the past in some people's minds, and that is why society continues to support like long-term probation and punishment, because like we've been programmed to believe that once you've done that, you like
there's no coming back from it. There's no
coming back from it. And if you do, we actually kind of got to keep an eye on you, because you might meet, you know what I'm saying? Like you still have this, you know? So a couple things there is that, like, you know, I'm really proud of you for like pushing the envelope and getting what you wanted, you know what I mean? Because a lot of people don't actually have the resources or the wherewithal or the knowledge to understand what your rights are, right?
And that's one of the biggest problems, is that the system's designed to keep us from knowing what our rights are and what we're allowed to do, and the language of the system. Like, you know, lawyers are basically linguists, right? Like, they study language. It's a whole different language that's spoken in court. It's not English. It's not language that common folk understand.
But like when you went into the system, you did not know. You did not have what you have inside your dome right now. You didn't have that when you were 21 years old. Yeah. You have it now because you took the time to do all the work and research and studied it, and and you had the mental capacity to actually do it. You know what I mean? That's how you acquire that knowledge, and I want to acknowledge that. Like, the reason why your story and the success you had doing it is so important, because there's so many people that probation continues to be a burden for them, but they meet criteria to petition and get off, but they don't know they don't have that option. They don't know that's an option.
Yeah, and the irony too, and I just want to name like a couple things. Number one is, like, the reason I was able to petition is because in 2019, a law was passed that said you can petition to end your probation the day that it starts. And it's interesting to me to watch a court who, you know, the entire purpose of the court is to uphold the law, right? And the entire purpose of a prosecutor is to know the law and uphold the law in the spirit of fairness and justice. And so why would we have a law passed in the state that says you can terminate your probation the day it starts, if not to recognize that some people don't actually need probation and it's not benefiting them and it's not benefiting society? And so, like, I have to believe, because of my knowledge of like what our legislative process looks like and how laws are made, that when a law passes, it's a representation of the fact that people in the state feel this way, and that's why we're going to turn something into law, and that prosecutors are supposed to represent the communities that they're in. But I went to court completely, like, I embodied everything that the law was meant to accomplish. And I had a prosecutor that was basically saying, like, I don't care about that law. That law doesn't match with my personal philosophies and points of view about Brandon. And so I'm going to fight it. And that's a broken system, right? That we have all these laws. We are a country of laws. We have more laws than any other nation in the world. And we have all these lawyers who make pretty good money to, you know, fight for justice in the spirit of the law, but they get to tailor which laws they believe in and which ones they don't. And that's the complete antithesis of what the system is supposed to be like. And so when I go to court and I kind of structure my argument around the fact that the law exists for a reason, and I'm showing you that my termination is in accordance with our law, that my conduct over the last 16 years of my life warrants not being on probation anymore. But then I'm also making the argument that it is burdensome to me. It prevents me from being able to travel with ease, which our listeners don't know is a pretty big deal to me, because I had a daughter born last week. And the only reason that I was petitioning for the probation to end was because my daughter was born in a different country. And I wanted to be able to go and be present and be a father, which is what we want from people in our society. That's what we want from men, to be good people, to be good fathers. And I have done everything in my power for the last 16 years of my life to be a good man. And then when the stakes are the highest they've ever been, I'm having a child, the system tells me, no, we don't want you to be a good man because we're not done punishing you. So there's an irony there, right? We want you to be under control and supervision. We want to have the public believe that safety is important. We're acknowledging that you're a safe person, but we don't want to allow you to be the man that we want everybody in society to be because you committed a crime 16 years ago. And so for me, it was really a personal thing because I'm not asking you to let me go on vacation. I'm not asking you to let me, cut loose and go have fun for a little while. I'm asking you to let me be present for my daughter in a different country.
But let's be clear about that. That is the reason why you wanted to end probation doesn't need to be litigated. That's not even the reason. You don't need to explain why you want to be on probation. You need to explain, okay, I met what the law is requiring.
The standards.
I meet the standards, and why it's important to me is not in the prosecutor's business. It's not the judge. It's you need to be judged based on your own merit.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Your conduct, right? And that's what the law said.
Right, and so we don't need to talk about why or what it's stopping you from doing. We just need to understand that, like, if you're doing the right thing and you meet this, then you have you should be eligible to come off of probation.
And that was the wildest part about the experience, is that the lawyers who were helping me with my petition had to keep coming back to that through a 4-hour hearing, right? Where basically the state wanted to relive.
Your trial was over.
Yeah, but they retried it during my probation termination hearing. Like, we talked about all the facts of the case and the mistake I made and the effect on my...
And let's be clear about this too. The other thing is that the DA also had the knowledge that the victim of your crime was in total support of you being on probation, not now, but several years ago.
Yeah, and now. And I think that was the kind of determining factor for the judge, is when my victim said that I don't have a problem with his probation ending. I think that was the thing that tipped the scales for me. But that's just another irony that came out in the process. And this is why I think, like, I don't want to use this platform just to tell my personal story and have people, either celebrate that I'm off probation or feel bad that I had to go through what I had to go through to terminate my probation.
Well, let's be clear, though. How many years? So I've been around this for a long time, right? Like, it's been incarceration, legal, like, this has been part of my life for a very, very long time. And you're the first person that I know that's been able to go to court in the situation you've been in and get it done. Like, I've never seen that happen before, Brandon. So it's okay, it is your story, but the importance of your story is that, like, that other people can do the same thing that you did. You can kind of create, like, okay, hopefully somebody reaches out to you and go, how can I do that? Because
people already have.
I meet criteria, and no one's ever told me that I can get this done. Yeah. I can get this out of my life.
And it's interesting because the practice historically has been that if you complete half of your probation with no issues, that then you can go to court, and the DOC, like your probation officer, will actually be the person that kind of prompts that process. Like, okay, you've done 2 out of 4 years with no problems, and we're going to end it now. And that was the DA's argument, is he's only been on for 4 months, so we don't have enough time. And I'm like, but I've been on community supervision for 28 months. So you've had plenty of time to show that I'm not a threat to society, and my conduct on probation has...
You've traveled the country.
Yeah, and I've been doing things that I hope matter in my community and trying to show up and make it a better place, a safer place, and get people to kind of relate to one another in a way that, like, we resolve conflict, through love and support instead of through punishment and more conflict. But I think that the story is also important because it really brought to light a lot of the irony of our system. And, like, you brought up the biggest thing for me that's the hardest pill for me to swallow, which is my district attorney that prosecuted my case came to court, and knowing full well that my victim has supported my efforts to get off of conditions, still argued that what I did to go to prison is somehow so abhorrent and so evil and so terrible that, society wouldn't benefit from me being off probation. But you're supposed to represent the victim. And so what do we do with a system?
Well, I guess that's my point. That was my point. Is that that there's that the prosecutor represents the victim. If they don't mention that or say the victim here is in full support, but I don't believe that.
And that's they don't have
if there's no differentiation between the two, then that is where our system is really flawed. Is that you get to make a judgment, or if this is really about justice, if this is really about justice, the victim of the crime has an impact on that. You know what I mean? It's I'm good. You know what I mean? Like Brandon has changed his life. You know.
And that's what we have to ask, like as people in society, is we have to ask what is the purpose of these roles? What is the purpose and the objective of our system? And so if prosecutors are supposed to represent public safety and they're supposed to represent the voice of victims, and you have a situation where the victim is in support of something and public safety is not in question and not in jeopardy, then why do we in society accept a system that allows prosecutors to completely throw away everything that they're supposed to represent because they somehow feel personally invested in the continued punishment of people? And so that's one of the ironies that we have to talk about that I learned at like a really unfortunate level, watching the prosecutor get so angry and so upset that I had the audacity to ask to get off probation, even though the law lays out why I'd be eligible and my conduct matches what the law asks of me. And so the other ironies are like things that we've already named as well, which is that the punishment served its purpose. I did my sentence. I did every day of a 17-year prison sentence, right? My sentence ended 4 months before I went to court. So I completed the punishment. I completed the incarceration. I don't have a track record of like getting in trouble or being violent in prison or out of prison. I don't have any of those things.
And I also want to be clear too, is that you also don't have, I mean, and I think sometimes the mitigating factor in some of these things are external, like diagnoses like substance use disorder or mental health diagnoses that would really impact whether you were going to be a safe person. Like you have no evidence of those things happening either at all.
No, and the only mental health issues that I have are actually from the trauma of incarceration.
100%.
So where I went into the system with, pretty sound and strong mental health, even though I was an adolescent and my brain wasn't fully formed, and I had some, the things that every young person deals with, not making, the brain science shows that until you're 25 years old, you're not fully developed, and you're, weighing risks and rewards isn't fully developed. But now the only mental health issues I have are like the extreme PTSD and anxiety of spending my entire adult life in prison, but I've managed those, right? And I've found communities to help me with those things, and I've engaged in really healthy growth since I came home from prison. But then I go to court where the stakes are really high for me to, get off probation, to be able to be the person that I feel like I need to be, the father that I need to be, and it's not enough, right? And even though we have all of that evidence and we track all of those things, like, okay, Mr. Brown doesn't have A, B, C, and D, and so like we don't really have anything to say that he jeopardizes public safety or is a risk to the public if we let him out, but we still argue against letting him off the conditions. And it's like, so those are the questions that I hope that people listening today really contemplate. Like, what is the purpose of our system if we don't give people the space and capacity to change? If we don't allow people to transform their lives from the person they were when they committed a crime to the person that they could be years later, then how do we expect to ever have a safe community if we continue to handcuff people to the mistakes that they've made? And then the other irony is even that prosecutor sitting in that courtroom, like, operates with the mindset of like that she's never made a mistake and is a flawless person, and none of these things apply to her because she's never been arrested for a crime. But nobody's perfect, and people always make mistakes. That's the human condition. And so why are the standards that we hold people who commit crimes to different than the standards we hold ourselves to personally? I believe as a prosecutor that if I make a mistake, I can learn from it and grow from it, and I shouldn't be punished for every mistake that I make. But I believe as a prosecutor that you, as somebody who's committed a crime, you're a criminal, you're a convict, there is no redemption for you. And that's not a world that I want to live in. I don't want to live in a world where somebody commits a crime who maybe suffered trauma as a young person and had violence and substance use normalized for them and didn't make a lot of choices before they committed their crime because they were just doing what they knew. I don't want to live in a world where we don't give them space to grow and heal and become better people, and also become catalysts to keep other people from committing those same mistakes that they made. And I hope that people listening and even people not listening don't want to live in that world either. But the longer that we keep a system that only wants to punish people is the longer that we keep a community that is unhealthy and unsafe. And that's what I really want my story to kind of prompt conversation about. If we have people that we can objectively look at and say, you've done the work, you've done the healing, you've done the learning, you've done the growth, and also you've, contributed in a positive way to the community, why can't we let the person be that person? Why do we always have to bring up, oh, but when you were 21, you did this? I know what I did when I was 21. And the other irony for me is that from the time that I found my remorse and my regret for what I did, I've always narrated that to thousands of people that I made a horrible mistake. I hurt somebody very, very badly and changed the course of their life. And that's something I wake up with every morning still to this day off of probation. But I go to court and it's, you're not remorseful, you're not regretful. I'm like, the evidence shows that I am. And my words and the way that I live my life show that I am. But you need that story to be true as a prosecutor, that we can't believe his remorse. Well, at what point do you believe it? Because here I am, right, off probation. I've been off probation for 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe. And I'm still sitting here saying, I regret the mistakes that I made that hurt that person. And if I could take that harm back, I would in a second, because it's a really hard thing to live with, knowing that you changed the course of somebody's life. But even still, it's not going to be enough for the system, that I'm still saying that even when I have nothing to lose and nothing to gain by saying it. And that's the problem, is we don't have a healthy system. We don't have a system that believes people are redeemable and transformable. And that's why we continue to punish them for as long as we possibly can. And it's not actually helping anybody. It's not helping the kids that go to prison. It's not helping the men or the women that go to prison. It's not helping the families. So all that the court tried to do and all that the prosecutor tried to do by keeping me on probation was make a victim of my child, by not having a present father, not having a father able to travel and be present and be everything I want to be as a father. So now my 10-day-old baby, if I hadn't gotten off probation, would have been a victim of our system, because she would have grown up for at least the first couple of years of her life with an absent father. So literally our system creates more victims, even though we say that we're there to support victims, but we're creating more victims. So it doesn't work, right? And thankfully, I wake up every day with so much gratitude that it did work for me, even though it was a dogfight, right? I felt like I was at war, and it did work for me. And I'm so thankful that I had a judge who could look objectively at the facts and say, it doesn't make sense to keep this person on probation. But you named it earlier. That's not the experience for 99% of people who try to go through this process, because they don't know better. And that's not the experience for most people, because they don't even know that you can put in for that. And, so in some ways, I guess it's a glimmer of hope that I was able to terminate my probation.
That's what I look at it as, Brandon, is that, like, for a long time, people, my experience with people that are incarcerated currently, and, you start doing things, you being a PhD candidate, is there's not many people coming out of the system that are in the position that you're in, or use that thing as a time. Like, you're a trailblazer for a lot of people, right? Like, it's unfortunate that it takes you to kind of move in that direction and make that happen, or whatever the reason, whatever it's for, however you feel about it, that don't matter. Yeah. Right. The fact of the matter is that we're having a conversation about something that actually happened, right? So it's like that's what needs to be talked about, is like that Brent, you were able to do something that hasn't been. It's not a common situation, and that it can happen for other people, right? Like, you can, like, and that's a fact. Like, it can't happen for the people. I didn't believe it could happen at all. I didn't believe it could happen for you, honestly. I was like, he's crazy, man. There's no way, man, in the back of my head. But I'm like, it's my boy. I want to support him. You know what I mean? And then I was like, when they said, we got to talk, and the judge said, I got to think about this. And then you called me up, and I heard heard in your voice a little bit. You were a little defeated, and I was
For sure.
you know what I mean? Like I was just like, God damn, I wish I was wrong. You know what I mean? And then I was the next day, and I was like so happy for you. But like there is hope within your story. It's not just a glimmer either. It's like there's a big hope.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I agree with that. I think it's hard to think about it sometimes, but I can tell you, you know, in my life for like specifically the last like 6 years or so, you know, I've done certain things knowing that the probability of success was low. And I didn't do them because I wanted these things so bad for myself. I did them for that exact reason, because I wanted other people to know that you can fight and you don't have to hear the word no and give up.
So you keep
And so whether it's like expanding access to education for people in prison, or whether it's going through the process of having to relive all the mistakes that I made when I was 21 years old and, you know, be called a monster in court and, you know, made to be like a psychopath, that's important for me, because if it succeeds, it does give other people hope that they can do it. And the last irony that I'll name about the system is one of the things that I was told by a lot of people is that the court's going to hesitate to do that because it might open the floodgates and they might get a bunch of petitions for people to terminate their probation. And I'm sitting here like, that's what we need. We need to open the floodgates for justice.
But you think about that now. And maybe this is something that we can talk about another time. But like, there's probation fees attached to everybody that's on probation. There's those are jobs. Those are people's jobs, right? And so the more people that are off probation,
the less probation officers are needed.
Right, blah, 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 right? So it's all, you know what I mean? If you follow the money around the legal system, you can really kind of see why things are happening the way they do. In my mind, I mean, at this point, I can't go and say anything but, like, why? And it's like, you ask the question, why? It's like, there's a financial implication around this in the system that needs to be talked about maybe a little more, but.
And what I hope through this episode, what I hope that anybody who's listening takes away from it is like that you actually have conversations with your friends and your loved ones and even people with opposing views to you. And you ask them like, you know, I listened to a podcast and it brought up some question for me. What is the purpose of our system when somebody commits a wrong or commits a harm? What do we want from those people? You know, and at every level, whether it's like a petty theft or somebody gets caught with drugs or, you know, somebody... you know, there's a fight and somebody gets hurt or somebody kills somebody in a moment of rage and passion or whatever the case may be, that regardless of what the crime is and what the sentence is what is it that we actually hope to achieve by sending somebody to prison? And if you ask yourself that and what you think the answer is as a society is that we should hope that people get better and learn from their mistakes, then we are all required to tell people capable of making laws and changes that that's the world we want to create. We want to create the world where people can actually become better and redeem themselves, because over 95% of people come home from prison. And so what we should want from them is that they come home a better person with better critical thinking skills, more empathy, more emotional intelligence. And it's our responsibility to create that system. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we really do have to continue to engage in high-level reform aimed at the abolition of a punitive system in order to create healthy communities. And that's what I really care about. Mm-hmm. And so I have chosen to suffer a lot in the hopes that it would inspire other people. And man, I've already gotten dozens of phone calls and letters about people saying, could you help me with that? And the answer is always yes. I will of course help you with that, because I believe we need to have a system where everybody's informed about what the goal is. And, you know, as always, I just want to thank the listeners for giving us the space to kind of unpack some of the stuff that we go through in our personal lives that really situate the flaws in the system at a bigger level than just us as people. And, you know, I'm so thankful that it worked out for me, because I did get to be present when my daughter was born, and I'll continue to be able to be present for her in her life, because now I don't have the restrictions of traveling that I would have had if I hadn't been released from probation. And that's a big deal, right? We want kids to grow up with their parents. We want communities to see what good parenting and good family and good community is like. And because the judge made the decision he made, in spite of the district attorney fighting vehemently against it, now I'm able to be the man I want to be and the father I want to be. And, you know, I hope that people give a lot of thought into that, the effect of incarceration on families and friends and communities and people, because that's really what we're talking about. We have to give people the space to change. So I just want to thank everybody for listening in on this episode, and keep following and keep supporting, and, you know, keep seeing Jeremy's gorgeous face on the episodes and hearing his seductive voice, and know that we're going to be here long